about a year since we have been actually active in the community. So it's really exciting for us to be engaged with this community, and thank you all for joining me today. And just to expand on the kind introduction that I was just given, and if you see me limping today, and if there's any award show for the best dressed man, I think it should go to me, or the worst dressed, right? Because here I am in this dress with sandals. And that is because I had a swollen feet on my way from Redmond to Bangalore, and that swelling has not yet reduced. So it's been in a lot of pain, but hopefully tonight we're going back home and get it addressed. So you'll see me limping a bit. So just to expand on my introduction and to give you a little bit of color, I have spent my entire career building databases. And right out of the school back in Canada, which I spent maximum of my life, I started working and joined IBM, of course working on DB2 databases. I was the performance architect, did a lot of work on that technology for about 16 years, and various other big data technologies as well, like Hadoop and so on. And then I discovered that I should stop doing things proprietary and I should go and do something open source. And that's what actually got me to Microsoft. And I'll share you some of my story there as well. I like telling stories. And I never, like 10 years ago, I wouldn't have ever imagined that I will land myself at Microsoft and doing something open source. So it's very exciting, and I want to relate my own story as I talk about the Microsoft journey from being a very Windows-centric proprietary software, box product-oriented company to now a very cool company that is innovating extremely fast and collaborating alongside with communities like Postgres and many other areas to go innovate faster and deliver great solutions to our customers. Now, like as I said, I really like telling stories, and I want to share a very good story that really inspired me the most. And let me play that, and that will actually be the foundation of what I'm going to be talking for the rest of my talk.
Technology has a tremendous impact on each of us, and our desire for discovery. It speeds theoretical evidence. It frees up people to think and to create. And it brings people together to solve big problems. Computational power is growing, and quantum computing is quickly being realized. Big data is providing new insights, with 90% of the world's data being generated in the last 2 years. What is our role as developers, technology leaders, and scientists at this pivotal time? We must engage in a public dialogue, particularly about the responsibilities of big data and artificial intelligence. I am pleased that Microsoft is actively engaging in these discussions to incorporate all points of view when addressing issues such as privacy, employment, equality, and humanity. Open platforms accelerate innovation. I was adamant that we open-sourced my ACAT speech system so developers could contribute and improve the project, thereby helping more people. Developers must continue building in the open, contributing code, and engaging in communities. We can achieve our greatest dreams when technology is an amplifier of, not a replacement to, the great things that people create. Developers today are helping to build this future. As a physicist, I believe I share many of the same traits as developers. We are all writers, we are all dreamers. Let us continue this journey together. desire for discovery.
All right. When I watch that video, I still get goosebumps. I mean, that's how technology is having profound impact in our daily lives, in everything that we do. And things like that wouldn't have happened without open source. And that's how powerful open source is. And developers are the very core foundation in our actually making this happen. And that's all of you. So big round of applause for all of you that have congregated here today, driving the PostgreSQL community, and thank you. And I wish the community grows and becomes more powerful, and we all collaborate and work together and actually making profound changes in the industry and our daily lives. So thank you. So what you see, the foundation here, is that the world is changing. If you see the pace of disruption that's happening around us, it's moving at an unprecedented pace. Now, before I go and talk about what this change is, it's very important to reflect back on how this change came to be. How many of you have been in the industry for more than 10 years? Very good. So, and for those that are not, perhaps it's a good lesson. It's a history lesson. And what I'm going to share also is like things that I have seen myself. When I started at IBM building proprietary software and going to customers, trying to solve their pain points, oftentimes I wanted to actually meet the developer. And IBM wouldn't allow me to go and meet the developers. Why? Because they were not powerful. I mean, why would you talk to a developer? He's not the decision maker. The decision maker is some IT. So essentially, developers were kind of left hostage to the decision makers and the leaders of their organization who had nothing to do with technology. And what that meant is developers were constrained. Even if they had to build a very simple website, they had to write a fat check starting right down from buying an operating system, a web server, a middleware, a database. And by the time you want a small website, it would cost you, I don't know how much. And then came this open source movement. Of course, the perspective that I shared is from the developer perspective. But what we have also seen is how things have changed when we are put in hard conditions. And there is no perfect example than to tie it to the recessions. Recessions are always good. Economic impact that helps drive the next wave that will help us move forward in the right direction. And I'm not a historian. The only major recession in my career life that I have seen is the 2008 recession. It had a profound impact on a lot of us. Industries, job, employment, humanity. There was a huge impact that was made through that 2008 recession. And as we came through successfully, the key things that drove us there was do more with less. You try to be efficient. You try to find new ways on how you can get your stuff done. And it's the same time, like as you see, credits to AWS and Amazon, when they started their cloud business back in 2006. At that time, nobody paid any attention. I don't need that. But they had this placed themselves well to absorb the 2008 recession, after which cloud really picked up, which was a good thing overall for all of us. And now we're all behind cloud. And similarly, data as well. We have seen growing and growing amount of data in all our lives with IoT, generating tons and tons of data. In almost everything that we have done, that we see around us, is stored in some form of data. And then the question became, so if I have so much of data, it's impossible, it's so expensive. Even though there were technologies like Hadoop, etc., that all came up based on the premise that, okay, if I reduce the cost of computing, if I can do distributed computing on commodity desktop hardware, maybe I can solve the problem. Yes, it did to some extent, but not completely, until cloud came that made computing very cheap. And also artificial intelligence. Now, if I have to work in that ocean of data, how will I be able to extract the ones that I really care for? And that's why artificial intelligence actually makes sense. That it will allow you to actually extract key nuggets that humans cannot. So this perfect inflection point of cloud, data, and AI is fueling our next wave of innovation. And the best of all, the pace of this innovation is driven by open source. Because none of this can have a profound impact across industry, across the globe, if it were not open source. And this community, this open source community, is driving that change. It's really now the era of developers. The developers like you are driving that change. And that is what the intensity that we need to maintain going forward. Be it with respect to how Postgres fits in this world of data, how OpenAI is playing a role, and how the cloud, being an open platform, is inviting all the rich technologies that are being developed to address the data problem and application and enabling creating intelligent applications. Cloud has also made, and open source has also made new businesses which otherwise would have never been possible. Think about Facebook. Think about Twitter. Think about Airbnb. All these companies would never have existed if not for open source. And that's a great thing, and that's a good thing. And on my way, traveling 20 hours from Redmond to Bangalore, I was reading a book, The New Kingmakers. And I was so much in love with this quote, and I said, okay, I should project it. And this is and this is the impact open source is having from the fundamentals of economics. Would you expect YouTube investing $500 million with paying software for like Oracle? No way. And today, how many of you are using YouTube? It's become part of our lives. Having said that, things are not always rosy, right? As much as in the commercial software world, we talked about, like with the companies like IBM, Microsoft, and Novell, and so many that made the heydays of the 80s and 90s, but built products, right? These companies had a product-centric view, monolithic packaging of software, and then selling for a premium licensing, right? Open source, I mean, developers didn't like it. Come open source, and now what we see? Proliferation of open source software. Why? Fundamentally, which one of the good things about that is, open source is not product-centric. Open source is more aligned to solving a problem, a particular problem. And that's a good thing. But as we think about extracting that value, and we put it in the context of an enterprise, the enterprise now sees a whole fragmentation of so many different open source software. Now they have to grapple their minds, which ones do I use? How will you educate them? Which ones to use when? And what enterprises really want is stability and predictability. That's the challenge for open source. While it has the positives, that it is really trying to solve the problem and the community coming together across corporate boundaries to solve the problem, the question is about now educating these customers, educating these people on when to pick what. That's a real challenge. And I can't stress more, as when talk to our customers, they really want predictability and reliability. That's the most important thing. They don't care about the soups and nuts. Developers like to reinvent the wheel, all that's goodness. But the end, reliability, predictability, because businesses are making bets that their neck is on the line. So let me also give you some more examples of how open source and cloud are fundamentally making a huge difference in humanity and making the world better. So this is an example where using a combination of open source on the cloud is enabling to solve problems like climate change. We all know how significant an issue climate change is. And this is regardless of the president of US, right? Another example around the profound impact open source, cloud, and open source databases like MySQL and Postgres are making a huge difference in fighting climate change. Right? So I could go on and on in terms of giving you examples of things that are now possible, of where things would just not have been possible before. And Postgres is leading this change. And although I started my career in working with open source databases, I've been following Postgres for quite some time. And I know the history of where it came from with the genesis. And my God, the progress the Postgres has made over the last 5 to 6 years. It's been amazing. It's been a very, very fast journey. So that's great. And what do we like about Postgres? And why is Postgres weathering that same fragmentation problem that I just talked about? Postgres is very unique. And that goes to the genesis of how Postgres was born, how Postgres was architected. From the ground up, from day one, Postgres was designed to be extensible. It created a kernel, a database kernel, and then allowed the community to go innovate around it via extensions. Started with relational databases, then starting with storing structured relational data. But then, it saw the opportunity of the NoSQL, the schema-less, or fast schema changes, and then added support for JSONB. Saw the opportunity around storing geospatial data, created PostGIS. And now, Postgres has become the favorite database engine of developers. Because no matter if they're trying to address and solve problems related to relational data or semi-structured data, they can rely on one engine to meet both these objectives. All on top of the SQL language, the power of SQL that you can do advanced queries and advanced analytics and drive insights. All within one database engine. That's, in my view, what has made Postgres very special and why it's fundamentally weathering that storm where you would see a proliferation of these different databases. If you have to use an example, just use how many NoSQL stores there are out there in the open source. You find hundreds, and they're still building new. And that's the goodness, and that's what we believe fundamentally why Postgres has a better chance to become even bigger much faster. And congratulations, DB Engine just ranked Postgres to be the best database for 2017. And that is the result of that. I mean, that's exactly what's happened. And we hope the momentum continues. And I'm sure it will. So what is Microsoft doing here? So I talked all about history, like everything. Right? What is Microsoft doing here? Right? Everybody wants to know. Right? So I just planted the seeds. All right. Microsoft journey. Again, through my own lens, because I like to personalize my stories. Right? Up until 2014, I never even imagined, will I ever work for Microsoft? Honestly, I never thought I'll work for Microsoft, because those were the days you would relate Microsoft as arrogant, very Windows, doesn't want to work with anybody else. What is open source? Open source is a cancer, right? And IBM at that time was doing very good in open source. Like with Linux, I got an opportunity to work with and contribute some code to Linux as well during that time. So I was doing fine with open source, but then I wanted to do more. But then Satya Nadella became the CEO. And then the transformation happened. And sitting at IBM, I started to pay attention. Things are really changing. Things are looking different. And as you can see, 2015 onwards, the number of bubbles you see in the box kept increasing, and that's what got my attention. People started to notice. I noticed. Wow, looks like something is happening here. I'm trying to pay attention. Before I knew, I had an offer, and I said, okay, I'm going to now work on open source databases. Which databases? Postgres and MySQL. I said, wow, fantastic. And more excited I was for Postgres, because that's the real database thing. Right? MySQL is what? Invisible, embedded database. It's a database. I mean, if I'm a developer, I want to create a website. I want an invisible database. I don't want to touch my fingers. I don't want to know how it works. Yeah, MySQL is a good fine database for those applications. But the moment you want to do something interesting, you want to do something complex things, yeah, then you now in the perimeter of Postgres world. Because now you can get your hands dirty. Now you have something to play, something to get you interested in. And these stats further assert my conclusions. Now, over 50% of the VMs on the Azure cloud are running on Linux. 2 in 5 VMs overall on Azure now run Linux. Since January, we are seeing the growth in containers 4x. Right? And this is not happening by some voodoo magic. Right? This is driven consciously as part of our Microsoft strategy as how we look at the cloud platform, which goes back to my previous message about that it has to be open platform. It has to be inviting regardless of what platforms, regardless of what open source software or stacks gets developed. Who knows what tomorrow is going to get developed? But your platform has to be open. If you don't have an open platform, then open source cannot integrate into that environment. And that is fundamentally how we think about at Microsoft in driving overall cloud. And these represents the 4 foundational pillars of how we look at open source. Starting from doing the most basic things, that is enable. What enable means? Give developers the choice and freedom to use whatever tools that they need to run on the cloud. Not being restrictive. Right? Play in their own terms, not Microsoft's terms. Full flexibility. Then provide value via integration. Integrate this across the wider ecosystem so you can get more value out of that investment. Integration across the other open platforms on the cloud, other services in the cloud. And then also lead by example by releasing our own software to the open source. And then also contribute back, which is what we want to do with Postgres as well. One of the foundational path we have taken with delivering Postgres on Azure has been using the community version of Postgres. We made that strategic bet well in advance. We are not going to fork the code. We are not going to have a compatible Postgres. We are going to have the community Postgres. And that is all about choice, and that's how we look at executing and delivering open source on Microsoft platforms. And yes, it is still early days. We hope the community sees our intent and allows us to contribute in meaningful ways. And that's an open request. It's a humble request of collaborating, and we want to work with the community, with all of you, in also making Postgres better and make it better and better on the cloud as well. And our journey continues. As we announced, starting with MySQL and Postgres, we extended it to MariaDB as well. It's going to come soon. Now let me talk about a little bit on how we went about doing this. And how, taking the community Postgres, how are we adding value on top? This is a very busy chart. And I'm going to peel this one by one. But as we thought about how we bring the community Postgres in its open source into a managed service and yet add value, differentiate, really solve some core problems, pain points that customers have, was a simple answer for us. In fact, we leveraged the same platform that we had built that powers Azure SQL Service. Because Azure SQL Service has been a service on Azure for 8 years. It has gone through 2 iterations of re-architecture based on all the operational experience and operating in the cloud. And we said, nothing better than actually leveraging the same platform and now adding support for Postgres as well. And this is built on the foundational core infrastructure of Azure. And the service fabric you see, which gives us the platform that is highly automated and designed to build high availability applications. And then our database services platform, which adds functionality related to backup and restore and recovery, roll forward, etc. So let's talk a little bit about each of them. And before that, this platform that is today powering Postgres on Azure has about 3 million plus databases under management. So it's a proven platform. Handles 300 billion requests a day. 300,000 plus CRUD operations every day. I mean, these are pretty good stats. I mean, this talks to the operational experience around managing and around delivering a managed experience and a managed service in the cloud. And it's the same platform now that is brought to Postgres. So I talked about the Azure Service Fabric, which is the fundamental underpinning on how we deliver high availability services. It's the same Azure Service Fabric that allows, it's basically essentially a platform to create a very distributed microservices-based architecture. And that's how we have built the service. It has the state management, it does replication, it does load balancing, it does resource governance, and a lot more. Essentially, it's a cluster of nodes which becomes a service fabric ring. And there can be thousands of nodes in these clusters. And that's how we have architected the service. And now going a little bit deeper into how the Postgres service itself is built, like you see, we have each control plane, which is basically a service fabric managed rings in every region. And our cloud, and we have about 42 regions across the globe, almost in every region and every geo. So we have, what you see here is a control plane, which is the front end of when a request comes to our cloud. Each of the boxes represents a service fabric-based application. It's a microservice. Have a front-end database connection redirector, wherein essentially when you have a connection endpoint coming in, the proxy sees the connection and then routes it to the appropriate node that has the database. And that's where the CMS, the cluster metadata database, exists, which is essentially information about all the databases, the IP addresses, and the tenants that exist in the cluster. It's very simple. And then we have a data plane. Now, each of the nodes have a set of platform services. They provide the backup, recovery, restore, all these availability functions, like the common platform like monitoring, alert, telemetry, et cetera. And then application services. Application services is essentially the Postgres. So we are using today Postgres running on Windows. And that has been because essentially the service fabric that is built on, when we built the SQL database service, at that time it existed only on Windows, and today, however, the service fabric exists on Linux as well, but we are running Postgres on Windows, and we are pleasantly surprised to see, I mean, not pleasantly surprised, but we knew that going in, it's a pretty stable product running on Windows. Of course, there are more opportunities to make it better. We do see examples when we look at the code, how Postgres has been developed and optimized on the Linux primitives, whereas in Windows there are a lot of room for improvement. And which is one area where also we want to actually contribute toward working with the community to make it better and better. As we see, the adoption of Postgres on Windows is actually a very good, significant number. There are a lot of users of Postgres running on Windows. So it's not that Postgres and Linux are just like synonyms. So expanding on what you see on the right, the application services, which I said, which basically where the Postgres service, the database tenant lives, stores the data and log files to a different Azure storage and the backup files to a different Azure storage. And when the tenant database fails, the service fabric automatically relocates it to another node. And that's the reason why we have a built-in high availability, wherein you don't need to set up replicas if you want HA. We can recover, we can spin up the database in a matter of seconds. So if you were to run Postgres on an infrastructure VM, your starting point for high availability is configuring the replication, 2 nodes, et cetera. But this architecture gives you that out of the box, where you can recover in seconds. the biggest question that we had was, how do we go and create a multi-tenant service and secure service, right? Because as we talked about it, security is the most important consideration for many of the customers that we talk to. Of course, we could go and run on a VM, which is an easy choice. But then spinning up VM is pretty heavyweight. Spinning up a VM would take up minutes. So and then there's a lot of baggage associated with VM. And then there are some container technologies out there like Docker, et cetera, that we also consider, but they're not very secure. So we had to go create our own container service using the SQL IP. With the philosophy of that container is a stripped down OS that disables about 80–90% of the system calls. The philosophy being that if we disable a bulk of the system calls, the attack vectors are exponentially lower and makes it more secure. And that's where you see how the secure process container and where we have the Postgres postmaster. So the connections goes to postmaster. The Postgres workers are basically for like one you have for every connections. And you see the PG extensions. And another area that we had to work on is the storage abstraction layer of like an ACID compliant storage, which again abstraction to the underlying SSD-based blob storage. So I know it was a quick rundown, but I wanted to essentially share how we have gone about architected our product and created a multi-tenant, secure, highly available Postgres using community. So we didn't have to change community Postgres to build these capabilities around on the top. But yes, there are a lot of things that our journey creating Postgres, it's been a 2-year journey for us if you count the days starting from the engineering. But if you count the days starting when we were publicly available, it was May of last year when we first announced a Postgres managed service on Azure Cloud. And since then, it's been humbling for us to see the amount of love that we have gotten from the community and also from customers. And also, our engineering experience has led us to significant insights in how we can make it better collaborating with all of you. And that's what we want to do, make Postgres better and make it more suitable for bringing in more and more applications. And that's our commitment to Postgres. Obviously, coming to these events, sharing our story is one way to do it. And we want to, of course, partner with the ecosystem partners as well. And we truly believe that for the community to thrive, it's not just about collaborating with the people that are checking in the code or the committers, but it's also the partner ecosystem that lives surrounding it. And how you work alongside with these partners so we are solving critical customer problems. So in conclusion, I see this is the era of data. This is the era of AI. This is the era of developers. It is your time. We are just the beginning of this chapter. Thank you. One critical important thing. For those who have not yet tried Azure, we're passing on the free passes, so Prem, you can lift your hands. And if you want to try Azure, you get free $100 credit per month for 3 months. And also, most importantly and also critical is, we are also hiring a lot of Postgres expertise. So if you're interested, please do come and talk to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunil. As I was saying, thank you for this insightful and interesting presentation. Next on the agenda is a word from our sponsors. As I mentioned in the morning yesterday, it's the encouragement and support from our sponsors that allows us to organize this conference at this very nice location. And I believe decent food as well, right? So let's hear it from the sponsors. We'll start off with second quadrant. So maybe have the representative come here and talk.